The Galactic Council had seen it all. For eons, they had watched species rise and fall, civilizations advance, and empires crumble into dust. Their collective wisdom spanned countless star systems, their technological advancements beyond anything any human could imagine. So when the first human ships entered the galactic space, it was no surprise that the Council's chambers erupted in laughter. These fragile little vessels, constructed with basic technology and seemingly pitiful in comparison to the ships of established galactic species, were nothing more than a joke to the highly advanced beings that made up the Council. At first, humanity's appearance was a mere curiosity, a species from a distant world trying to reach out into the stars, but with no real understanding of what they were facing. To the Council, it was almost comical. They watched as the human ships, clunky and inefficient by their standards, struggled through space, sending clumsy communications that lacked the grace and intelligence expected from any interstellar civilization. The Council snickered among themselves, dismissing humans as an insignificant blip on the cosmic radar. After all, they'd seen it all before, lesser races, who thought they could take on the universe only to be swiftly squashed by the sheer weight of galactic progress. But there was something about humanity that they didn't understand. Quiet tenacity, a hunger that went beyond the mere pursuit of power or knowledge. Something deep in the human spirit pushed them to continue, to defy odds, and to reach for something greater, even when the stars themselves seemed out of reach. They could have laughed forever, comfortable in their superiority, but they didn't realize that in their mockery, they were overlooking a species that had more than just the will to survive. They had the drive to conquer. It wasn't until humanity began to show signs of unexpected progress that the first whispers of unease began to echo through the Council's halls. What started as a trickle, a few unexpected victories against hostile alien species, a few innovative technologies that outpaced the Council's predictions, soon turned into something far more alarming. Human ships, once mocked for their lack of sophistication, began to adapt. They engineered new technologies that caught the attention of even the most advanced species, and their tactical ingenuity proved to be a force to be reckoned with. The Council tried to ignore it at first. After all, they reasoned, these humans were still unproven, still too small in number, and too new to really pose a threat to the galactic order. But the humans didn't just survive, they began to thrive. Their ships became more than just functional, they became formidable. What was once seen as a ragtag fleet now moved with precision, a new kind of grace that stunned the Council. They outmaneuvered the galactic empires, often taking advantage of their enemies' overconfidence and arrogance. The sheer unpredictability of human tactics, something the Council had never truly understood, began to wear down even the most battle-hardened species. The humans fought, not just with weapons, but with sheer resolve, pushing the limits of their technology and their minds. They adapted faster than anyone had ever anticipated, and that was what terrified the Galactic Council. One by one, species that had once mocked humans found themselves at odds with them, and the result was always the same defeat. First, it was the Quel'The, a species known for their vast intelligence and cunning. They had long dominated the trade routes of the galaxy, and their fleets were among the most advanced. Yet when the humans began to challenge their control over certain sectors, the Quel'The found themselves completely outmaneuvered. What they assumed were strategic missteps on the humans' part turned out to be calculated risks that paid off in ways the Council had never foreseen. The Quel'The retreated, and humanity's presence in the galaxy grew stronger. Then came the Vornak, a race of brutal warriors feared across the stars for their unrelenting aggression. They had long been a terror to peaceful species, subjugating entire civilizations with their sheer military power. Yet the humans didn't flinch. They fought back with a ferocity that matched the Vornak's own, using the very tactics that had made them the laughingstock of the Council guerrilla warfare, unconventional strategies, and an unyielding will to win. The Vornak, who had never encountered an enemy who refused to break, were forced to retreat. Each victory sent shockwaves through the Galactic Council, but still, they refused to believe that humanity could be a real threat. The Council continued to dismiss the humans, their laughter still echoing in the halls, growing fainter and fainter as time went on. But then came the moment that changed everything. The Galactic Council had convened for one of its regular meetings to discuss the ongoing human conflict. The laughter that had once filled the room was noticeably absent. There was a tension in the air, something the Council could not ignore. Something had shifted, and they all felt it. The humans, it seemed, were no longer just a nuisance. Their ships, once deemed laughable, now represented a growing force, one that might be more than the galaxy could handle. That was when it happened. Without warning, an entire fleet of human ships, far more advanced than anyone had imagined, appeared at the Council's doorstep. They didn't announce themselves. There were no grand declarations, no speeches. They simply arrived, silent and unstoppable. The ships seemed to hum with energy, their sleek forms gliding through space like they had always belonged there. The Council members scrambled to respond, but their systems couldn't seem to lock onto the human vessels. There was something about their ships, something they couldn't understand, that rendered their technology useless. The Council tried to communicate, but the humans didn't respond. Instead, they simply waited, a quiet, unyielding presence on the edge of the galaxy. And as the Council members began to realize the full extent of the situation, a strange sense of dread crept over them. They had laughed at the humans for far too long. What the Galactic Council didn't know, what no one knew, was that the humans had more than just advanced technology at their disposal. They had something much older, much more dangerous. Something that had been lurking in the shadows of their history, waiting for the right moment to strike. Something that, when unleashed, could change the entire balance of the galaxy forever. And as the Council members looked at each other in stunned silence, they realized that they had underestimated humanity in the worst possible way. And as the human ships loomed ever closer, they could only wonder, was this the beginning of the end for the Galactic Council, or was something even darker coming for them? Something beyond the reach of their understanding? To find out, they would have to wait. But the clock was ticking. The Council's chambers fell silent, the usual murmurs of debate and casual conversation fading into uneasy whispers. Every member, from the ancient Salkar to the young but brilliant Zintar, felt the weight of what was happening. There was something about the human ships that had them all on edge, something they couldn't put their fingers on. For all their accumulated wisdom, for all their technology, they were suddenly vulnerable in a way they hadn't been in millennia. They had never encountered a species like humanity. Over the ages, they'd seen countless races rise and fall. Most of them had followed predictable patterns. First, a thirst for expansion, then inevitable conflict, and ultimately destruction at the hands of a more advanced force. The Galactic Council had always ensured that balance was maintained, that no one species grew too powerful too quickly. They had the knowledge, the technology, and the influence to shape the galaxy to their will. But humanity, with its stubbornness, ingenuity, and unpredictable nature. And now, as they sat in their vast, sterile meeting room, they were realizing just how deeply they had miscalculated. The human fleet, which had been nothing more than a nuisance, now loomed large on the Council's radar. Not only had their technology advanced at an alarming rate, but they seemed to understand the intricacies of warfare in a way no one had expected. The Council's advanced sensors had tried, and failed, to lock onto the human ships, which moved with an eerie, almost supernatural precision. It was as if their technology had outpaced even the best the Council had to offer. A soft, low hum filled the room as a holographic projection of the human fleet materialized in front of the Council's gathering. The ships were sleek, far more advanced than anything the humans had ever shown before. Their hulls shimmered with strange energy patterns, and their engines seemed to defy the basic principles of physics. A cold sweat ran down the backs of many council members. How had they done this? How had they come so far, so fast? The human ships were not supposed to be here. Zintar, who had been one of the most vocal in dismissing humanity's potential, stared at the projections with wide, unbelieving eyes. "This is impossible," he muttered under his breath. "We watched them, studied them. They shouldn't have the technology to build these ships." Salkar, the eldest member of the council, leaned forward. His many eyes scanned the projection, his ancient mind racing to connect the dots. "No, they shouldn't. But they do. And that's what terrifies me." The room was filled with silence as the full weight of the situation settled on the council members. For the first time in centuries, they found themselves at a loss. The arrogance that had long defined their rule was gone, replaced by an unfamiliar fear. They had underestimated humanity. But even more concerning was what humanity had been hiding, what they had been keeping from the council all this time. As the council members exchanged uneasy glances, a sudden thought struck Salkar. His many eyes narrowed in realization. It's not just the ships. It's the humans themselves. Their unpredictability, there's a force within them that we can't measure. Something primal. Something ancient. Zintar scoffed. Ancient? You're saying they're somehow tapping into something old, something forgotten? He shook his head in disbelief. That's just superstition. Is it? Salkar's voice was calm but heavy with meaning. Consider this. These humans, this species has not been part of the galactic order for long. They've spent most of their history isolated, unaware of what lies beyond their homeworld. And yet, they are not only surviving in space, they are thriving. They've defeated species far older and far more advanced than they are. And now they stand at our doorsteps, challenging our very existence. This cannot be explained by mere science. Zintar opened his mouth to argue but found that he couldn't. There was an undeniable truth in Salkar's words. The humans had survived against the odds time and time again. Their tactics, which seemed haphazard and chaotic to outsiders, had proven to be incredibly effective in battle. They used what they had, but they used it in ways no one expected. And now, they had something the Council couldn't understand, a force, perhaps even a secret, that had allowed them to outpace civilizations far older and more powerful. The hum in the room grew louder as the Council's central data core flickered to life, displaying more details about the human fleet's arrival. There was something else that was troubling, something no one could fully explain. The ships, These human vessels were not only appearing on the Council's sensors, but they were somehow disrupting the systems around them. The Council's sophisticated artificial intelligence, the most advanced in the galaxy, could not process the data. There were gaps in the readings, areas of the fleet that seemed to vanish, only to reappear moments later in different locations. The technology was sound, but there was something off. Something fundamentally different about the way the human ships interacted with the fabric of space. As the data streamed in, a new and more chilling realization began to settle in. The humans, it seemed, had learned to manipulate more than just technology. They had begun to tamper with the very laws of physics, something no race, not even the most ancient species, had dared to attempt. Was it possible? Had they unlocked the mysteries of faster-than-light travel in ways the Council never imagined? Or had they discovered something even darker, something hidden deep within the universe that had been sealed away for eons? There was no time to find out. The Council's emergency protocol kicked into action. Alerts began flashing across the room, signaling that the human fleet was not just nearby, it was advancing. Faster than expected, and with no intention of backing down. This was no longer a simple military incursion. The humans had come for something far more significant than territorial control. They had come to challenge the Council's very existence. As the tension mounted, the Council's leaders gathered their thoughts. Their only hope now was to act quickly, to use their vast resources and intelligence to push the humans back before it was too late. But even as they devised their plans, they couldn't shake the nagging feeling that they were not in control. Something had changed. They had played the game for millennia, but the humans were no longer pawns in that game, they were players in their own right. Solkar glanced around at the assembled leaders, his voice grave. Prepare for the worst. These humans may not just be our downfall. They may be the harbingers of something far darker, something we've long forgotten. But even as he spoke, the doors to the chamber began to open, and a deep, resonating sound filled the room. A message was coming in from the human fleet, one that would change everything. Would the Council's arrogance finally catch up with them? Or would humanity prove to be more than they had ever imagined? The answers would soon come, and when they did, nothing would ever be the same again. The message from the human fleet was simple, but it chilled the Council to their core. It appeared on the central screen, but the words it displayed were not in any known language. There were no familiar symbols or codes to decipher, just strange, shifting patterns of light. For a moment, the room was completely still. Even the most seasoned council members, who had long since learned to expect the unexpected, felt a knot of unease tighten in their chests. This was not a typical communication. This was something different. The message pulsed for a few moments, slowly shifting colors, before it stopped entirely, leaving only one symbol remaining, a simple, stark image of a human fist, clenched and raised, surrounded by a glowing ring. A universal symbol of defiance. The room erupted into chaos. Zintar stood up, his many eyes wide in confusion. What is this? What does it mean? His voice was laced with panic now. This is no ordinary declaration of war. This is something else. Solkar remained eerily calm. This is not just a message. This is a challenge, a signal that they are no longer willing to be ignored. They are coming for us. But even Solkar could not hide the unease in his voice. The symbol was too powerful, too simple. It was as if the humans weren't merely saying they were ready to fight. They were declaring that they were willing to destroy everything in their path, to tear down the very foundation of the galaxy. For the first time in their long existence, the Council realized just how deeply they had miscalculated. They had underestimated not just the humans' technological capabilities, but their spirit, their refusal to back down, their willingness to fight against insurmountable odds. The galaxy had seen many species rise and fall, but none had carried that same unyielding determination. The humans had something more than firepower. They had a heart that burned with the need for freedom, for survival, for something beyond the cold calculations that had ruled the Council for centuries. And now, that heart was at the Council's door. As the fleet of human ships continued its advance, the Council scrambled to react. They tried to establish contact, to reason with the humans, but their efforts were met with silence. No response came. The human ships simply moved forward, closing the gap between them and the Council's capital world. They were coming. The tension in the room grew unbearable. Each council member seemed to shrink into themselves, the weight of the situation too heavy to ignore. There was no plan that could easily stop what was happening. No technology they possessed could match the unpredictable ferocity of the human will. "Do we prepare for total annihilation?" asked one of the council members, her voice trembling. Salkar looked down at the projection of the fleet, his many eyes scanning the ships, studying their movements. "We can't stop them with brute force alone. Their unpredictability, their unwillingness to conform to our rules, this is the greatest weapon they have. We need to find another way." But time was running out. The human ships were approaching the capital, and soon they would be within range to strike. No amount of council diplomacy, no amount of technology could hold them back now. The humans had done what no one else had ever dared to do. They had come this far, and they had no intention of retreating. "Then we do what we must," Salkar muttered. "We fight." But even as he spoke those words, doubt crept into his mind. What would fighting accomplish? The humans had already proven they were not like the others. They had already shattered the Council's carefully constructed image of invincibility. How could they fight a species that had not only survived their attacks, but had thrived in the chaos? There was a brief pause in the room, a moment of collective hesitation, as if every member of the Council was weighing the same horrifying truth. They didn't have the answers. This wasn't just about war. This was about something bigger. This was about a shift in the balance of the galaxy, a change in power that no one had seen coming. As the fleet drew nearer, the Council's systems began to flicker and stutter, unable to maintain their grasp on the incoming threat. It was as if the human ships were somehow infiltrating the Council's very systems, bypassing their defenses with terrifying ease. There were reports of systems going offline, of weapons becoming unresponsive, of entire sectors of the capital's defense grid going dark. It was clear now that whatever advantage the Council thought they had, whatever superiority they had relied on for centuries, was slipping away faster than they could comprehend. The lights in the room dimmed as the artificial intelligence systems began to warn them of an incoming breach of human forces infiltrating the very core of their command structures. There was no time to act, no time to prepare. The humans were here, and they were already in control. In the distance, the human ships drew ever closer. Their engines blazed like stars in the darkness, their paths unyielding. Every moment brought them closer to the heart of the Council's empire. As they moved, the Council's once pristine networks buckled under the pressure. Screens shattered. Communications went dead. The great barriers the Council had erected to protect themselves from the unknown were crumbling. The last of the Council's leadership stood, their minds racing with last-ditch plans, trying desperately to hold on to control. But they were no longer in charge. The galaxy had shifted in ways they had never imagined. And then, as the human fleet entered the Council's final defense perimeter, the unthinkable happened. A massive energy pulse erupted from the heart of the human armada, sending a shockwave through the galaxy. The blast was not a weapon. It wasn't an attack at all. It was a signal, a declaration. The light was blinding, its energy indescribable, rippling through space and reverberating through every corner of the galaxy. It was a signal that resonated with something ancient, something deep within the very core of the universe. The Council froze. They had no idea what it meant, but they felt it deep in their bones. The humans were not just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for something more. And that was when the true realization hit them. This wasn't just about power or control or even war. This was something far larger. The humans had awakened something that the Council had hoped would remain buried forever. And in that moment, as the shockwave spread, the galaxy felt the weight of a new order beginning to take shape. The real battle, it seemed, was only just beginning. The shockwave from the human fleet rippled across the galaxy, its pulse reverberating in the very fabric of space itself. The Council's sensors, still struggling to process the energy, flickered erratically, displaying data that made no sense. Waves of electromagnetic interference swirled through their systems, and for a brief moment, it seemed as if the entire galaxy had gone silent. The hum of the Council's machines, the constant buzz of interstellar communication, all of it vanished into an eerie stillness. And then, as the silence stretched on, the true horror of the situation unfolded. The Council members, still reeling from the initial shock, watched in disbelief as the galactic map on the central screen began to change. It wasn't just the immediate systems that had been affected. The ripples from the energy pulse were now spreading outwards, destabilizing entire sectors of the galaxy. Planets, once stable and secure under the Council's rule, began to experience unexplainable phenomena, unpredictable gravitational shifts, disappearing ships, and, in some cases, entire colonies vanishing from existence. The Salkar, his ancient mind grasping the magnitude of what was happening, spoke in a voice that was barely a whisper. "It's not just a signal. It's an awakening." His words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Zintar's voice broke through the tension. "What do you mean? What is this?" Salkar's many eyes widened as his mind raced. The humans didn't just send out a signal. They've tapped into something far more ancient than they or anyone understood. Something that had been hidden, buried for millennia. And now they've awakened it. The council room fell into stunned silence. No one dared to speak, each member trying to process what Salka had just implied. What had the humans unlocked? What ancient force had they brought to the surface? The holographic projection of the human fleet flickered back to life, and the ships were now moving in a way that was entirely unnatural. They weren't just advancing toward the council's capital. They were accelerating, not in any predictable pattern, but with a precision and speed that seemed to defy all known laws of physics. The ships, once sleek and sophisticated, now seemed almost alive. Their hulls shimmered with an unnatural glow, and their movements appeared to ripple through space itself, leaving trails of energy in their wake. The council's defenses, already faltering under the pressure of the previous shockwave, now completely collapsed. Weapons that had once been capable of vaporizing entire fleets were rendered useless, their targeting systems scrambled and useless, against the oncoming human armada. Nothing worked. As the human fleet drew closer, a new message flashed across the central screen. This time, there were no symbols, no images. Just one word, written in stark, cold letters: unite. The words sent a wave of fear through the council, one that was palpable even to those who had ruled the galaxy for millennia. What did it mean? Who were the humans calling to unite? And why was this word suddenly so dangerous? Before anyone could react, the galaxy itself seemed to shift once again. A burst of energy, so powerful it cracked the very fabric of reality, erupted from deep within the human fleet. The energy spread outward, distorting space itself as it reached far beyond the Council's defenses, beyond their reach. Entire star systems seemed to flicker in and out of existence, their stars vanishing in flashes of light. It wasn't just the Council's world that was affected now, it was the entire galaxy. Then, just as quickly as it had started, the wave of distortion stopped. Council members were frozen, staring at the projection in horror. The galaxy, their galaxy, had been irrevocably changed. Impossible, Zintar whispered, his voice thick with disbelief. This can't be happening. They've tapped into something that isn't just technology. It's something else. Salkar, now pale, his many eyes scanning the chaotic data, nodded slowly. The humans didn't just unlock a lost technology. They've awakened something far older, something far more dangerous. And they're using it to tear apart everything the Council has built. The projection of the fleet shifted again. This time, the ships were no longer a simple threat. They were part of something bigger, something the Council couldn't even begin to comprehend. The ships were merging with something else, their energy signatures blending into a massive, pulsing entity. It was as if the entire fleet was being absorbed into a singular, living force. And then, as the Council watched, it happened. The fleet, the strange energy, the terrifying power, all of it began to converge toward the core of the galaxy, toward the Council's capital. It wasn't just the humans. They were leading something vast, something that had been slumbering for eons. Whatever the humans had awakened, they had done more than just call upon an ancient power, they had summoned it. Prepare for impact, Salkar ordered, his voice taut with fear. If they are leading this force, if they have control over it, we are beyond the point of negotiation. We must act now. But even as he spoke, the room shook. A low, grinding noise reverberated through the walls, and the central core's emergency systems flared to life. The Council's protective barriers, once thought to be impenetrable, began to flicker and fade, the seams of their defense crumbling. Outside the Council's capital, the human fleet moved forward. The entire galaxy seemed to hold its breath. Then, without warning, the first of the human ships broke through the Council's outer defenses, its engines burning brighter than any star, its hull shimmering with the unnatural energy that had been released. It was not just a ship anymore. It was part of something larger, something incomprehensible. The ships, now, a unified force, moved in perfect synchronicity, their destination clear, the heart of the galaxy. The Council's capital. The Council members watched, powerless, as the energy wave they had once feared reached its peak. The galaxy's future, the very fate of all the civilizations that had ever existed under the Council's rule, hung in the balance. The humans were no longer just a threat. They were the heralds of an ancient force, an unstoppable power that threatened to undo everything. And in that moment, the Council realized that the war they had once thought was theirs to win was now something else entirely. The real battle had just begun, and the stakes were higher than any of them could have ever imagined. As the human fleet approached the heart of the galaxy, the tension in the council chambers reached a boiling point. The projections of their capital's defenses flickered erratically, their systems barely holding against the oncoming storm. The combined force of the human ships and the strange energy they had awakened was growing too powerful to ignore. The council had no more time for hesitation, no more plans to implement. Their only option now was to fight. But as the first of the human ships crossed the final threshold of the Council's outer defense zone, something unexpected happened. The sky itself seemed to pulse, as though the very fabric of space was bending. The pulse of energy that had been spreading through the galaxy halted, a sharp, frozen silence that blanketed everything. The energy that had once been uncontrollable suddenly stopped, its intensity fading to nothingness. For a brief moment, the council members allowed themselves to believe that they had somehow won, that the humans had been halted. But then, the truth became apparent. The energy didn't dissipate, it simply shifted. The projection of the human fleet on the central screen morphed again, their ships no longer just advancing toward the capital. Now, they were united with something else. The energy was no longer separate from them. It was part of them. And that was when it became clear. The Council's emergency systems buzzed to life as the first few human ships deployed something unseen before a massive network of smaller, agile vessels that swarmed the capital's defenses like a hive. Each ship, though tiny compared to the grand human vessels, seemed to move with terrifying coordination, bypassing the Council's outermost barriers as though they weren't even there. Soka's voice cracked under the weight of the realization. It's not just technology. It's biology. The humans aren't using just machines they've adapted, evolved their ships into something organic. The organic ships melded with the energy pulse, an uncanny fusion of biology and technology. They were not merely human anymore, but something far more terrifying, a living, breathing manifestation of willpower and innovation. They weren't just tapping into ancient powers. They had become the vessel of those powers. The first wave of these new ships breached the Council's core. For the first time in eons, the mighty Council felt true fear. The systems that once controlled everything, their fleets, their planets, their entire empire, were failing before them. The human ships, now integrated with this unknown, ancient force, tore through the heart of their defenses like a spear through flesh. For all their ancient wisdom, all their superior technology, the Council was no match for the relentless drive of the humans. It wasn't about power anymore. It was about a force that transcended technology, a raw, primal energy that had been awakened by the humans' unyielding will to survive. In the council chambers, members watched as their once proud empire crumbled. The projections showed the planet's defensive shield, the last bastion of their control, beginning to fracture. What had once seemed unbreakable was now nothing more than a relic, shattered by the unstoppable tide of human ingenuity. The ship's pulse was growing brighter now, and as it expanded, it began to engulf everything in its path. But then, just as the final assault seemed inevitable, something unprecedented happened. One of the smaller human ships, a craft barely larger than a scout vessel, detached from the swarm. It drifted toward the Council's heart, unaccompanied by the growing energy. It was an outlier. This ship didn't move with the same force or certainty. It moved slowly, cautiously, and then, without warning, it sent out a transmission, directed solely at the Council. The Council's systems, still scrambling for control, were able to decode the message. It wasn't a battle cry. It wasn't a final challenge. It was a plea. "Stop!" the message echoed in the Council chambers. "We didn't awaken this to destroy. We woke it up because it's the only way to survive." The words echoed through the room, and for a brief, terrifying moment, the Council members were left speechless. The humans who had been poised to obliterate everything weren't trying to conquer. They were asking for help. But the twist didn't end there. As the message settled, a new sequence of images appeared on the projection. In stark contrast to the violent rise of the human fleet, these images showed something else entirely. Desolation, a dying star system, barren planets with no life to sustain them. It was a record, a history of something far older than even the Council's ancient existence, a race of beings far beyond anything the Council had ever encountered. A race that had once wielded the same energy the humans had now unleashed. And those beings had, in their arrogance, destroyed themselves. The humans had unlocked something far more dangerous than they realized. They had unleashed an ancient sentient force, a remnant of a long-dead civilization that had once ruled the stars. But instead of an army, instead of a weapon to wield, the humans had awoken a force that threatened to consume everything. Nothing could stand in its way. The very galaxy itself would be torn apart unless it was contained. The plea from the lone human ship wasn't a call for war. It was a warning. The Council, in their infinite wisdom, had been correct in one thing. The humans had awakened something far beyond their understanding. But what they hadn't anticipated was that the humans weren't the ones controlling it. The Force wasn't simply a weapon, it was a hunger, and it would devour everything in its path, regardless of the species standing before it. The Council members, now realizing that the true enemy wasn't the humans, nor even the Council itself, it was the Force they had awakened, scrambled to understand what could be done. The situation was dire, and time was running out. It wasn't about winning anymore. It was about survival. As the message ended, the lone human ship merged back into the fleet, joining the swarm once more. The energy began to build once again, the force of it almost too much to bear. The Council had no more tricks, no more strategies to fall back on. In the end, the final, greatest twist came when the Council realized what they had been too blind to see. The humans weren't conquerors, they were survivors. They had awakened an ancient force, yes, but they had done so in desperation, hoping to tap into something powerful enough to save them from the same fate that had destroyed the galaxy before. And now, as the final countdown to the galaxy's doom began, the fate of all existence hung on the single fragile thread of a species that had once been dismissed as insignificant. It was no longer about a fight between species. It was about survival against a force that would wipe out everything, if not stopped. And for the first time in history, the Council had to admit, the humans might just be the only hope left. And then, as the final wave of destruction loomed closer, the message they'd received echoed in their minds. We woke it up to survive. It was the humans' last chance. Would they be able to control the force they had unleashed? Would the galaxy survive? Or would the ancient power consume them all? The silence stretched on. The galaxy hung in the balance, suspended between annihilation and a fragile hope. The Council members were gripped by uncertainty, staring at the now faintly glowing human fleet. The energy they had awakened, which had once seemed like a weapon, now seemed far more like a force of nature, unpredictable, uncontrollable, a remnant of a lost civilization that had once sought to conquer and failed, consumed by their own hubris. The humans had stumbled upon it in their desperate bid to survive, but now the question wasn't just about survival. It was about whether they had inadvertently set loose the galaxy's final, unstoppable wave. Salkar, the once overconfident leader of the Council, had never known such fear. For all his years of wisdom and control, for all his power over the thousands of species that populated the galaxy, there was nothing he could do. No ancient tactic or superior technology would be enough to stop the force the humans had unwittingly unleashed. This wasn't just a war anymore. This was a cosmic crisis, and the very fabric of reality felt like it was unraveling. The humans, they're not the enemy, Salkar whispered, his voice barely audible. The realization was too much for him to bear. They're the key to stopping this. The other council members turned their gaze toward him, their expressions a mixture of disbelief and confusion. They had laughed at humanity. They had mocked their primitive technology, their ragtag fleet, their seemingly childish ambitions to rise in the stars. And yet, here they were, standing at the threshold of the galaxy's ultimate fate, and the only hope lay with these very humans, whose ships now pulsed with an energy they didn't fully understand. The tension in the council chamber was suffocating. No one spoke. They were all waiting for something, anything that would provide clarity. But nothing came. The humans' ships hovered at the edge of the galaxy, still connected to the strange energy they had unleashed. There was no sign of aggression, but there was no sign of peace either. The energy that coursed through their vessels seemed to respond to their very presence, like a living entity, aware of them. Then, as if responding to an unspoken command, a lone figure appeared on the communication screen. The human representative, the one who had been directing the fleet from behind the scenes, was now facing the council directly. He looked calm, unshaken, but behind his eyes there was something else, a deep, unsettling sadness. The weight of what had been done and the responsibility that came with it. "I'm glad you're listening now," the human said. His voice was steady, but there was an edge to it, a trace of exhaustion. "We didn't want this. We didn't choose this. But we've awoken something ancient, something beyond our understanding. And now we need to stop it. Together." Salkar leaned forward, his ancient mind racing. "What is it? What have you awakened?" he asked, his voice desperate for answers. The human sighed, his gaze heavy. "It's called the Nile, an entity that existed long before any of our civilizations. We found records of it in our earliest explorations, ancient ruins on a forgotten world. It consumed everything in its path, devoured whole star systems, until the species that wielded it, whoever they were, collapsed under its power." There was a long pause, the silence in the room stretching long enough for the gravity of the words to settle in. The Nile, the entity that had destroyed an entire race, a force so ancient that the Council had never even known it existed. It wasn't a weapon. It was a living, breathing presence, a darkness that spread and consumed until nothing remained. We need to find a way to contain it," the human continued, his voice now soft but determined. "It can't be destroyed. It's too powerful. But maybe, just maybe, we can bind it. With all the combined energy of our fleets, your technology, and the strength of human will, we might be able to push it back. Contain it before it wipes us all out." Salkar stood motionless, his mind spinning. A containment strategy. It seemed impossible. Yet, The humans had been right about so much already. They had done the impossible, survived against the odds. Perhaps they could do the same once more. The council had no choice but to trust them. The council members exchanged glances, their eyes filled with fear and uncertainty. But even in the darkest of times, the council had always known how to unite for the survival of the galaxy. Now, that unity was being tested like never before. Do you believe this is possible? Salkar asked the human, his voice a mix of skepticism and hope. The human nodded slowly. We have no other choice. A plan began to form, slow and tentative at first, but with each passing moment, it grew stronger. The council, for all their power, had never faced a force like the Nile. They would have to combine their knowledge, their strength, their very essence, to fight back against this ancient enemy. And they would need the humans to help lead the way. With the human fleet leading the charge, the galaxy's remaining forces gathered. The sheer diversity of the species that came together was a testament to the strength of the Council's past unity. Yet, there was something new in the air, something more profound than anything they had ever experienced before. Humanity, once laughed at, now stood at the forefront of this great battle, a symbol of defiance and hope. The final confrontation took place in the deepest reaches of space, beyond the outer rim of the galaxy. The Nile's energy surged outward, threatening to devour everything in its path. The human fleet moved with purpose, their ships now more powerful and united than ever before. But it wasn't just their ships that made the difference, it was the humans themselves, each one tapping into their boundless resolve, their sheer will to survive. The combined forces of the Council and humanity gathered, their energies focused on a single, unified goal: to contain the Nile. The battle was unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. Waves of energy clashed in the void, the very fabric of space itself warping under the pressure. The Nile's power surged forward, pushing back against the united front, but the humans' unwavering determination kept the line intact. It wasn't easy. There were losses. Entire fleets were lost to the Nile's hunger. The council members fought with everything they had, but it was clear that humanity's strength, their resilience, their drive to never give up, was the key to holding the Nile at bay. And then, at the height of the conflict, when it seemed like all was lost, the human fleet made their final move. They activated the containment field, channeling the full force of their combined energies into a single, focused beam of power. The Nile recoiled as the beam struck, and for the first time since its awakening, it faltered. The battle wasn't over, but the tide had turned. Slowly, the Nile's energy began to recede, drawn back into the containment field. The galaxy wasn't saved yet, but they had bought themselves a fighting chance. As the battle began to calm, Salkar looked at the human representative on the screen once more. This time, there was no mockery in his gaze, no disdain. There was only a quiet, profound respect. "You've done it," Salkar said, his voice thick with emotion. "You've saved us all." The human nodded. "We didn't do it alone. This was a fight for all of us. A fight to survive together." And so, the galaxy began to heal. The Nile was contained, bound by the combined efforts of humans and the once mighty Galactic Council. The war that had seemed inevitable became a distant memory, a reminder of how fragile the galaxy truly was, and how even the smallest, most underestimated species could change the course of history. The humans had not only survived, they had brought the galaxy together, not through conquest, but through a shared will to live. Their story would be told for generations to come, a testament to the power of unity, resilience, and hope. The galaxy, once divided, had learned the hardest lesson of all. The true strength of a species lies not in its power, but in its will to survive together.